I would like to have a specific example of how you believe, in your case, political influence was involved.
Well, I can give you an example. On, I believe it was January 9th of 2007, Jim Haynes was the DOD General Counsel. He had been nominated for a seat on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. He'd been approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee, but before he came up for a vote of the full Senate, what became known as the torture policy, the torture memo surfaced, became an impediment for his confirmation. So my first year on the job, Mr. Haynes pretty much had a hands-off policy. He had minimal contact with me about military commissions. On January 9th, 2007 was the day that President Bush announced he had withdrawn the nomination of Jim Haynes for the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. And 2 hours later, Mr. Haynes calls me up and says, "How quickly can you charge David Hicks?" Now, at that point in time, we had the statute in place, the Military Commissions Act. We had no convening authority. We had no manual for military commissions. We had no regulation for trial by military commissions. So the major pieces were not in place, and I'm having the DOD General Counsel calling me up the day after there was a meeting with the Australian ambassador asking how quickly I could charge David Hicks.
Were you told specifically that there were not to be any acquittals?
There was a meeting, which I would call a hiring interview, on August 2nd of 2005, where I met with Mr. Haynes before being appointed as chief prosecutor. During that meeting, Mr. Haynes brought up that these trials would be the Nuremberg of our times. And I told him that, during Nuremberg, there were some acquittals. And certainly as a prosecutor, you never go into court aiming for an acquittal. But I said, in my view, if that should happen, that at least it, in some respects, would tend to validate that this is a fair process. And that was when he it struck me as he had never considered that thought before, that there could be acquittals. And he looked at me and said, "Acquittals? We can't have acquittals. We've been holding these guys for years. How would we explain that if we had acquittals? We've got to have convictions."